Weather is about to get crazy across the United States, where we are going to see several days of severe weather across parts of the Great Plains, the Ohio Valley, and as well as the Midwest between Sunday all the way through the end of this week. In addition to this, we are going to be dealing with a big heat wave across a large chunk of the United States, and we might see our next tropical storm or hurricane develop in the Atlantic Ocean over the next few days, and this could cause some problems for areas like Florida. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down everything that you need to know about all of the crazy weather that'll be happening over the next 7 to 10 days. We are going to begin though first with what's happening across the United States right now, and overall the weather's been fairly quiet for the last week or so. We haven't had any big severe weather events, no hurricanes, nothing like that, at least across the United States, but we do have a couple of interesting features that are going to eventually lead to a few days of severe weather, one of which is going to be this trough that is actually in the upper levels right now that's moving across the Midwest. Now this won't bring severe weather, but it's going to continue to bring some showers across much of the Midwest and the Ohio Valley throughout the morning and afternoon hours, so just keep that in mind. But overall, this is not something that I'm expecting any severe weather out of. Now later today, we are going to see an increased risk of severe weather across the central and northern plains, and this could actually pose a threat for damaging winds, hail, and maybe even an isolated tornado or two. We'll talk more details on that here in just a second. And then once we go into Monday, all that activity will move into the Midwest, where we will have the potential for a line of thunderstorms that'll produce damaging winds and maybe even a few tornadoes across parts of the Midwest and as well as the Ohio Valley. For the rest of the country, like the Northeast, for example, it is relatively quiet. We do have a little area that we're watching for just south of New England where we might see some sort of subtropical system develop, but overall nothing is really expected out of that. Now the weather is going to get pretty crazy over the next several days when it comes to the continental United States, where we are going to be dealing with several rounds of severe storms. So let's talk more about that here in detail, and we're going to begin with the jet stream, which gives us an idea of the weather patterns that are happening across the United States. There are a few features that I want to show you right off the bat, and a lot of it has to do with these shortwave troughs that we have located literally in several areas. We have an upper level trough back over in the Midwest that is bringing the cloud cover and some showers this morning. We have another trough back over in Montana that'll aid the threat for severe weather today in parts of the central and northern plains, and then yet again another trough back over in parts of southern Canada, and we have yet again another trough back over south of New England, and this one is also just going to bring some showers. That is our subtropical low that is going to maybe try to develop into something, but no tropical storm is forecasted out of that. Once we go to Monday, this will eventually kind of merge into one system back over in New England. We are eventually going to be watching this ridge back in the southern plains, and what this will allow for is a northwesterly flow. The reason why this is concerning is because we'll be watching for the threat of lines of thunderstorms that could be moving across the Midwest or the Ohio Valley as we go into Monday or Tuesday, so be very mindful of that if you're in those areas. We're going to talk more about what that means for your area in just a moment. Once we go to Tuesday into Wednesday, the weather pattern is basically going to stay the same for several days, where we will have a northwesterly flow, and this should eventually allow for more lines of thunderstorms to just keep erupting basically across the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, even by the middle of the week. And then by the end of the week, this ridge will start to move back to the west. We will still have a northerly and northwesterly flow, but I think overall things settle down just a little bit. I think we'll at least have a couple more rounds of showers and thunderstorms in the Ohio Valley and maybe even the Northeast as we go into Friday. And then eventually by Saturday into Sunday, the weather pattern becomes very, very quiet for most of the country, where a ridge will dominate across the western and central tier of the country, and maybe a bit of a cool down in the Northeast, but overall not looking like anything very meaningful at this point. Now, there will be a risk of severe weather for really the foreseeable future, at least in some part of the United States. We'll probably have 4 to 5 days in a row of severe weather risks, and we might even have to go live for 1 or 2 of them on the YouTube channel here, so make sure that you're subscribed down below. We're going to begin with today's risk, which is mostly going to be across parts of the northern and central plains. We do have a slight risk of severe weather for South Dakota, Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, and as well as Kansas. Marginal threat outside of that goes all the way back over even into western Illinois. The main concerns for today will be damaging winds. That's really the primary concern. We'll also be watching for large hail and maybe even a couple of tornadoes. I do want to point out that there is a hatched area in South Dakota. That is where the greatest confidence is today for some damaging winds that could be as high as 80 to 85 miles per hour. Now, I don't think we're going to be live for today's threat, but we'll keep a close eye on it this afternoon and evening if we have to go live. We're going to have really, I think, a few different areas of thunderstorm activity where we'll have probably 3 or 4 different lines of thunderstorms that develop develop later today. Our tornado risk is mostly going to be across northwest Iowa back into parts of South Dakota, but obviously it's a pretty low risk today. It's only at 2%, so I'm not super concerned about today, but it is something to watch for. Now, honestly, tomorrow I think could be a bit crazier, and I think we'll be live tomorrow as long as there's some sort of upgrade to the risk for severe storms. We do currently have a marginal threat of severe weather across the Midwest, but I would honestly not be shocked at all if we at least get a slight risk for severe weather, maybe even an enhanced risk for damaging winds. There's also a marginal threat back over in North and South Dakota, but the main concern will be in the Midwest in the Ohio Valley, where the threat for damaging winds, maybe some isolated hail, and then also a few tornadoes will be possible. We do have a very large 2% tornado risk right now for Monday, and I would not be shocked if we get like a 5% risk somewhere back over here in maybe like Illinois, for example, or southwest Indiana. But the problem right now with tomorrow is that there is uncertainty on where the storms fire up and if they even fire up. So that's why there is not yet an upgrade to tomorrow's severe weather risk. But if confidence grows throughout the day today, do not be shocked if there's a slight or maybe even higher risk than that across parts of the Midwest. Now, here's the timing for severe weather today across the northern plains. Overall, there will be storms out there this morning into the early afternoon, especially across South Dakota back through extreme western Minnesota. Most of these will be elevated, but as we go later into the afternoon, we're probably going to see several lines of thunderstorms trying to develop. There will be several areas of interest. Again, it's kind of hard to predict these sorts of events as they are very small mesoscale features, but we might see a line of storms back over in like Iowa, for example. We could see one over here in Minnesota develop. I think our main one, though, will be right here in the middle of South Dakota and also one back down in Nebraska. Those have the best chance of evolving into something throughout the afternoon and evening hours, with the greatest chance for damaging winds being right here in the heart of South Dakota. And then once we go into the evening hours, that'll eventually move into Iowa. And as long as we have some sort of line of thunderstorms, or at least some thunderstorms during the afternoon in Iowa, that line should overall just kind of weaken out as it moves into Iowa overnight, and eventually going into Monday morning, we're done with storms there. Back over in the Central Plains, things will be relatively quiet up until about 4 to 5 o'clock this afternoon, where storms will fire off quickly. We may see a line of storms develop here. We also just might see a few discrete cells. I wouldn't rule out a brief tornado somewhere in here, but I think the risk overall is pretty low. I think our greater chance for at least an isolated tornado or two will be in South Dakota or extreme northwestern Iowa. And then as we go overnight tonight into tomorrow morning, things are again relatively quiet across the Central Plains. Now, the Midwest today should be somewhat quiet. We're gonna have some showers and thunderstorms out there from that upper level trough that is currently in place here across parts of the Midwest. That'll start to kind of fizzle though as we go into Monday. We'll have some storms out there Monday morning, plenty of rain as well that could lead to some localized flooding. Once we go later into Monday afternoon though, into the evening hours, that is when we're going to be watching for a batch of energy to try to develop back over here in Illinois and Indiana. And if this is able to develop into a cluster, this could go rogue and kind of get a little bit intense. We actually could see a full-blown mesoscale convective system develops, which basically just means a line of thunderstorms capable of producing damaging winds and maybe even an isolated tornado or two. Now again, this does remain uncertain, and exactly where this develops is also a question mark. And so again, make sure that you're staying tuned to the channel. We'll have a video tomorrow morning as well if something is, needed for a video here, because I think that there could be some changes here to the forecast. But overall, we will probably have some sort of cluster or line of storms developing somewhere in the Midwest tomorrow. Where that is very uncertain. It could be further north in Illinois. It also could even be over in Michigan. We don't really know quite yet, but we'll have a better idea, I think, by either tonight or tomorrow. Also, follow us on Twitter and follow us on Facebook at Max Velocity WX. We'll post updates probably throughout the day today if anything does change there. Now, here's what we're looking at beyond Monday. As we go into Tuesday into Wednesday, I think the weather is just going to kind of stay the same across the Midwest, where several rounds of thunderstorms will be a possibility. I think Tuesday afternoon and evening will be more of a northern and central plains sort of threat, maybe a couple of storms over in the Ohio Valley. And then once we go into Wednesday, that area of storm activity will likely move into the Midwest, where we might see another mesoscale convective system. And then by Thursday, this all just kind of shifts into the Midwest, where there will probably continue to be several rounds of thunderstorms. And many of these will be mostly mesoscale convective systems, meaning mostly a damaging wind threat. And then by the weekend, I think things start to quiet down a bit across those areas. Now, the tropics are heating up again. We do have another area of development here in the Atlantic Ocean. Currently back over in the central Atlantic Ocean is where this particular tropical wave is. And over the next few days, we're going to be watching for at least a medium confidence for right now of this developing into a tropical storm or maybe even into a hurricane. If it does become named, it would be named Debbie. That would be our fourth named storm of the year so far here in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, as of now, it is currently forecasted to go in the direction of either the Gulf of Mexico, Florida, or it could take a boomerang turn back over east of Florida. There are a few scenarios that could end up happening here, all of three of which are very uncertain at this point. We don't really know if this will develop into a tropical storm or even a hurricane, but we are watching this closely because if it does develop, it will likely impact the United States to some extent. Now, here are two different computer models to kind of give you an idea of what the uncertainty looks like right now, which it's pretty large. As we go to Thursday into Friday, we'll be basically watching this tropical wave coming out of the Bahamas. This could develop into a tropical storm as early as Friday or Saturday, and that's at least what the European model is showing. European model at one point was showing this either going towards Louisiana or Texas, and it even had it going into Florida. At this point, though, in the most recent run, this is actually staying east of Florida, but it does intensify into a hurricane as it moves up the east coast, so we'll have to watch that very closely if a scenario like this were to happen. Now, the other scenario is something like the GFS model, where it literally shows almost nothing down in Florida aside from just rain, and there's nothing tropical with that basically at all when it comes to like a tropical storm. So there are a couple of scenarios. There really are dozens of scenarios, but those are two of the main ones. That gives you an idea of the uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. We don't know what's exactly going to happen with this. At this point, though, if you're in Florida or even up and down the East Coast, just stay weather aware, but no reason to panic at this point. If you see anything on social media, it's probably hype if there's like a category 5 hurricane or something being, advertised, because that's not right now in the forecast. Right now, there's nothing forecasted other than just this area development that might develop into a tropical storm as we go later into the week. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.